man was killed by one of his own lions at the Mahala View Lodge north of Pretoria. The fatal attack took place on Tuesday afternoon near the Dinokeng Game Reserve. It's reported that another two of his lions dragged him from the enclosure in which he was attacked. This enabled rangers to shoot them dead in order to retrieve the owner's body. To talk us about this kind of a very dangerous trend that we're seeing, I'm joined in the studio by Karen Trendler. She's from the National Council of SPCAs. Karen, thank you so much for coming in. When we heard the story break, it was a man who was killed by the lions. And the next piece of information that came out, it was lions that he owned. And the reaction almost immediately is, well, what did you expect? Your reaction to the story?
Well, I think firstly just to say our sympathies with the family. This is a very tragic situation.
Indeed.
But unfortunately, if you look at the situation, when you have tame or humanized lions, they are unpredictable and more dangerous than wild lion. And unfortunately, lions are by instinct predatory, and their ability to hunt and successfully survive in the wild is based on that instinctual behavior, how to identify an opportune moment to hunt, how to pick up weakness. And Mr. Van Biljon was an elderly gentleman and apparently turned his back on the lion.
He was apparently, according to reports, he was on his haunches fixing a fence, and his back was to these three huge lions.
And the lion may have initially played, thought it was play, but the situation probably escalated quite rapidly. The minute there's that tension, there's the fear, there's the adrenaline going. That is what happens. Instinct kicks in.
Now, I've heard various interviews with people like Mr. Van Biljon who talk about their love for for these kinds of animals, that they believe that what they do is helping to educate people. But you would think then that people that are so well schooled in the behavior of these kinds of animals would know that doesn't matter how trained you think they are or how well you think you know them and vice versa, they're still a wild animal and those instincts do not go away.
Those instincts are there all the time. They don't go away. And as I just said, a habituated or a tame animal is even more unpredictable. They've lost that instinctive fear of humans. And who knows what will happen the minute your back is turned, the minute they pick up any weakness. And then they may attack in play, they may attack in aggression, and once they realize they have the upper hand, and if you think of the size of the lion and the size of the man, once the lion realizes it's got the upper hand, it just escalates to a tragic situation.
For the National Council of SPCA, is this a worrying trend for you?
Unfortunately, yes, it is a worrying trend. We don't believe that the industry is regulated either from a human safety point of view or from a welfare point of view. Over the past 10 years, there have probably been about 40 incidents that we know of, some fatal, some not fatal. And that doesn't include some of the incidences where farm workers on these lion farms have been very severely injured and are paid off just to keep quiet. So it is a very, very concerning trend.
What have you tried to do to try and raise the need for this kind of regulation? Has there been any interaction with government or law enforcement?
There has been a lot of interaction, not just from the NSPCA, but from other bodies as well. Just ongoing appeals to say this industry is just not regulated from so many perspectives, and that this, unfortunately, is bound to happen.
Now, according to reports on this specific case, the lodge where these lions were kept would advertise on their website that they've got 3 lions and that Mr. Van Biljon offered lion lectures, feeding, game drives for guests and that kind of thing. So it's really a money-making business. And in as much as you can't paint all of these kinds of institutions with the same brush, you also have those institutions that we have seen stories where these animals were not being looked after correctly. And I think even the SPCA has come across cases of these animals being abused as well.
We've just won a court case judgment based on the welfare and the cruelty that we're seeing in the industry, and the need for the authorities and for the Department of Environmental Affairs and provincial authorities to take welfare into account. And so often you find that when there are welfare issues, there are human safety issues as well. So it's an industry that really, really needs to get looked at. And when people always say to us, but it's educational, and how are people ever going to love something if they don't have contact with it? Speak to any child and ask them about a dinosaur, and they can tell you the names and the history. They've never touched or had contact with a dinosaur.
What do you think is the hold-up in there being a firmer stance on regulating this industry? And should there also be stronger involvement from authorities involved in tourism?
Well, I think from the welfare side, we've just recently won that judgment, which we're very, very happy about. So hopefully from a animal welfare point of view, that'll go ahead. But certainly there needs to be a lot more on the safety side. If you're a registered zoo, you are supposed to prescribe to the South African Bureau of Standards, have safety barriers. But a lot of these lion facilities and smaller tourist facilities don't prescribe to that. So there are inadequate safety regulations. And the permit officers say it's not their problem. It's something that really, really needs to be looked after. 40 incidents in a very short period. How many more?
Indeed. If anybody's watching and they think they might know of an institution that perhaps is keeping wild animals illegally or is abusing them, can they just contact their local SPCA and that person will put them in touch with the right unit?
They can contact their local SPCAs, and then they can also contact the Wildlife Unit at the National Council of SPCAs with any concerns that they have.
Okay, thank you so much. Karen Trendler is from the National Council of SPCAs. Thank you so much for your time.